Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is the Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel. This is another episode of the making of my Empire Total War Let's Play over on the Something Awful forums. This time is going to be a little bit different. It's addressing a direct question someone had about how trade works and whether protectorates are worth it or not. So I am going to start fairly basic with this, just talking about how trade just generally works. First off, you've got your home city. This is the most important city in the game for trade. All trade has to pass through your main city before it can get processed elsewhere. So in this particular case, I've got the port of Rotterdam. Everything I collect in this game, all of my trade resources, have to go into Rotterdam and then they head outwards. So it's by far my most important trade port in the game. It's necessary for my spice trade, my horn trade, all of that other stuff. So all products I produce across my empire have to go to Rotterdam, and then they head out to the trade partners that I have from there. So as you can see in this particular case, I've got a ton of these tiny little ships denoting trade heading into Rotterdam and then heading back out. And the ones heading in are carrying all of my export goods, which are then processed at Rotterdam and then exported out to my trade partners. Next to that is the city. The city works the same way. The city of Amsterdam works the same way for all land-based trade. All of my land-based trade has to go into Amsterdam. And you can tell if it's making it there through these little caravans. The way trade at land works, because it's a little bit more complex than at sea, is that all trade has to go along any of these roads, which you can follow on the little map here. It has to go to your capital. It can only pass through friendly territory, and it can pass into a single trade partner that has a connected road that is adjacent to one of your territories. So as you can see, I've got a road leading from the Netherlands to Cologne over to Hanover. I've also got that road traveling through Hanover over to Berlin, but I'm not trading with Berlin by land, and that's because that little road there does not pass through friendly territory, even though Hanover is an ally. So if I were to take over Hanover, I would now meet the condition required to trade with Berlin. Now, trade only occurs with your trade partners. You don't trade with any of your own provinces, so anything that I have doesn't actively give me money. The way trade works between my own provinces is any resources go through my provinces that I control to my capital and then are redistributed to the other nations out in the world. So yes and no. You can blockade my trade by taking over provinces to disrupt trade by land, which stops me from gaining those trade resources, which stops me from distributing them elsewhere, but I don't gain any direct benefit from doing so. As you can see as well, trade works in the same way out in other provinces or in other global theaters. For instance, here you can see that all of my trade is going out. Even though I've got a trade route back here to Mexico, that's not actually the direction that these ports are going. So the sugar produced in Cuba, the tobacco produced in Cuba, all has to go all the way back to Amsterdam and then is re-sent back here all the way to Mexico. And you might think that that's a little bit strange, but that's just how this game works. So whenever you're sort of defending your trade income and trade lines, generally you have to realize that anything disrupting trade from here is going to disrupt the good receiving, or the good being shipped to Amsterdam. Anything over here will be disrupting the trade to Mexico. So slight differences. If one of them is more important than the other, it can make a bit of a difference, but it doesn't necessarily make a big difference. Now, trade comes from multiple different sources, the actual income. The major one that you're going to find yourself getting is what's classified as other goods, which is various miscellaneous products that you're shipping from one country to another. And they don't ever define what it is, and this never really changes as far as which nation you're trading with. So here you can see that my trade of other goods with Ottoman Empire, Savoy, and Hanover are all fairly similar. But if you look at my trade in horns, ivory, it's dramatically different. I'm trading way more horns, 10 times as many horns to the Ottoman Empire as compared to the ones being sent to Hanover and Savoy. So the way this game works is these other goods are going to be a fairly fixed income. It's disrupted here, so it's much lower, but otherwise it's fairly similar across the board. And your trade income of these luxury goods is dependent on the wealth of the nation you're trading with. The wealthier they are, the more of it they'll buy. Now, to a certain extent, this doesn't really matter, because if, for example, I lost the Ottoman Empire as a trade partner, all of the rest of my trade partners would pick up some of the slack, so I'd still make a similar amount of money if I lost them as a trade partner. I would, however, lose, of course, the other goods bonus. The next highest form of trade income, if you're careful with your diplomacy, is going to be your long-term trade partner bonus. Now, the longer you're trading with a particular individual, the more taxes you can put on them and the more of the other goods category you'll be sending to them, I suppose. I'm not overly sure what it's supposed to represent entirely, but all in all, what it means is that the longer you're trading with an individual nation, the more money you'll make from them. So here you can see that I've been trading with the Ottoman Emperor for a very long time, so I'm receiving an additional 1,887 from them, whereas Hanover 711. That's because long-term trade partner does seem to be affected slightly by the size of the nation. But like Sweden, very high amount as well. Portugal, fairly high amount. And then you get all the way down to Venice, who I've just become a trade partner with again. And they're not giving me any bonus at all. Russia, which has been blockaded the entire time, giving me no bonus at all. So the longer you're trading with somebody, the more money you make. So it's important to make sure you keep those trade agreements as long as possible for the additional income. That will probably be your second highest source of income for a lot of the game until you can control a lot of trade resources. Now, if you're someone like the Dutch, you will end up controlling a lot of these trade resources, which can become your secondary or even primary form of trade. In this particular case, it's probably a little bit more than my other goods category, so it is probably my current primary source of trade. Basically, you control any of the nodes that produce that good, which could be from a plantation in one of your provinces, such as this tea plantation over in Mysore, or it can be through these sea trade nodes, such as this East Indian spice trade route, which is earning me 3,120 gold per turn. But those products then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, all go back to your capital and are redistributed and sold for a price which is indicated here. Okay, so each unit of each of these products is priced accordingly. And these prices fluctuate based on how many of each of these commodities are being exported worldwide. So this fluctuates based on supply and demand to a certain degree. Ivory is almost invariably the most expensive trade resource. So if you can monopolize that, such as my incredibly selfish and greedy trade route over here in the Ivory Coast, you can earn a lot of money through these trade nodes. And once again, you do need someone to trade these too, so it's not necessarily important to get these later on. Currently, since I'm expecting to lose trade partners, I've stopped investing in expanding my plantations and I've stopped investing in building more trade ships. So that means that I won't have to find new trade partners to sell additional trade resources to, even though my current trade partners can probably pick up some of the slack. Now, what determines how much of all of these you can sell to any individual trade partner is the level of your trade port. As you can see, my trade port in Rotterdam is a global trading company, which is the highest upgrade you can get for a trade port. And one of the benefits of a global trading company is listed here. It says improves export capacity, which increases trade values. So if my port at Rotterdam were, say, a commercial port, which is a lower level port, which also has improves export capacity, increases trade values, but of a lesser degree, what I'd find is instead of making 1,300 about for every other goods category for each nation I'm trading with, I think I would be earning about 1,000 is how much I was making. In addition, I wouldn't be able to trade 81 tusks to the Ottoman Empire, as it would be more like a maximum of 70. So making sure to upgrade your ports allows you to increase those trade values quite significantly. Of course, that only works at sea. Trade by land seems to automatically match that, and I'm not overly sure how that's calculated. But basically, upgrading your main port in particular, your capital port, will dramatically increase your trade income just through the passive amounts. The other way to increase your trade income is through research on the philosophy tree. You use Wealth of Nations, which increases the growth of the trading root income, and joint stock companies, free trade doctrine. So you use Wealth of Nations and free trade doctrine, which are fairly advanced philosophies, but both of those combined will increase your trade income dramatically. Now, the other question that was asked to me was about protectorates and if they were profitable or not. The best reason to take a protectorate is because you want a trade partner that you can sort of rely on. In this particular case, I have to have an army in Milan or Venice, or both, to counter a potential attack from Rome. And I'm expecting that they'll probably eventually end up attacking me, so I do need to keep armies there regardless. But what that means is that I can keep an eye on Genoa with that army in Milan, so they can't rebel against me by breaking the alliance and then breaking the trade agreement. So they're essentially guaranteed income. And over here, you can see I've done the same to Sarajevo, Bosnia, which is under the control of Venice. Since I need to keep a tab on Prepburg, Hungary, I can also keep an eye on the Venetians in Sarajevo, Bosnia, which lets me take them as protectorate. And as for the actual income, as you can see, if I controlled this country, the amount of tax revenue I'd receive from them is 573 gold every turn. Now, by contrast, I'm trading with Venice for 1,607 every turn, which is about 3 times as much as I'd receive from taxes from them. Not only that, but they have to pay me a certain amount every turn as a sort of tariff for being a protectorate, and that's listed under here. I think I was earning about 5,000 from piracy, so they're probably paying me about 700. Genoa's probably also paying me about 700 a turn for being a protectorate. Similar, though, Genoa is making considerably more money than Venice, but if you look at their trade income value, even Genoa is giving me more money than they're earning in tax revenue. And they have their tax revenue set fairly high. As you can see, they're earning 43% of their revenue through taxes. Or they're taxing 43% of their national productivity here. So their taxes are set fairly high. What this means is that if I controlled it, I'd probably only be getting about 20%. So I'd probably be getting about 800 to 900 gold per turn from them. So significantly less than the amount that I'm getting through trade. And like even the trade by itself is usually going to be higher than the conquest value. The only time you don't want to take somebody as a sort of protectorate is when you're attacking someone's big capital city. For example, if I were to take Berlin from the Prussians, they're earning considerably more money than they would pay me if they had a trade agreement. And in fact, they do have a trade agreement. So Prussia over here, they're giving me 2,347. They're being blockaded, so it should actually be more like 2,800, I believe. But that is far, far less than the amount that they're earning from taxation. Their taxes are actually also set relatively high, but that's mostly because they've got a much more advanced government building. So what this means is that if I take over somewhere like Berlin, I want to make that one of my provinces because it earns me more money. But for these smaller provinces, keeping them as a trade partner is far more valuable than the tax revenue they produce otherwise, especially when I have to guard them. So that is basically how protectorates work. You only want to take them if they're a relatively small nation that would provide very little tax benefit. And when you can sort of rely on them to not invade you because you need to have your army there. As well, I kind of want my army to be here to keep check on Savoy, which could also decide to attack me. They've been on their border waiting to spring at France, I think, for a long time, so I've been kind of worried about that. But I can't make them into a protectorate quite yet. In any event, that's pretty much everything you need to know about the economy of trade in this game, as well as protectorates. Just to sort of answer the questions directly that were asked to me, no, trade does not work between your own provinces. You can only earn trade income by trading with other nations. and protectorates are profitable if they're smaller nations. So I think that'll answer everything about trade in relatively good detail. I hope this has been informative, and I hope to see you all next time.